All right. Well, welcome to another expert interview. As always, great content, awesome guest. So let's jump straight in. Dion, thanks for joining us, man. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
So good morning, buddy. Myself. So I am here in Nashville, Tennessee. Been here for a little over a year. Been in the insurance business for over 23 years. 12 years ago, got recruited by BBSI, Bear Business Services in Southern California to help a very small branch kind of grow. So 12 years of doing that. We started opening up other markets, Devin, and as you know, understanding BBSI, they're always looking for new places to go. Nashville, Tennessee was one of those places where they wanted to go. And I looked at the landscape of Southern California, and if that was a place I wanted to retire, looked at the market, and I looked at Nashville, and anybody that has ever been out here will probably have the same conclusion that I came up with. And that was, let's go out to this new market, to this great place, and see what we can do. So we've been out here in Nashville for a little over a year, and we love it. I wouldn't look back. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Love it, man. So BBSI, for those of you who don't know, I was also an area manager. So love the company, love what they do. Give us a rundown. The PEO industry is still fresh, but there's so many different things you can offer. So kind of give us a highlight of the service offering so we can kind of ground the conversation and people where you're going to be coming from.
Yeah, no, good question. And let me go backwards to go forwards because yes, you were a part of BBSI and we worked together. This animal today in 2022, almost 2023, is a very different animal than it was back in your day. Very different. So let me start by that negative moniker that you just used, PE, right? When I say that, a little tongue in cheek. Professional employer organization, a lot of people in the industry don't like the PEO space. And I get it. I was a broker for over a decade, and I did not want to compete with PEOs because they took my clients. Yeah, they didn't work friendly with brokers. There was a lot of things that we didn't like. They assumed liability of employees for my clients, meaning they recruited them or staffed them, whatever you want to call it, right? So a lot of changes in the PEO space over the last few years. BBSI, Bear Business Services, is a hybrid PEO. I like to say that because traditional PEO, when people use that moniker, think staffing, recruiting, right, Devin? I mean, that's kind of
For sure.
right. That's not what we do. The way I like to explain Barrett Business Services is we're a business solutions group. At the foundation of what we do is we work with small companies, small being, yes, we do have some accounts that are 1,000 employees or more, but our average size client is 20 to 50 employees. That's really where we live and breathe. And what we do day in and day out is both technical and some of strategic for a small business owner who's struggling. So, number one, payroll processing, right, Evan? You know that you've been around small businesses a long time. That's always a headache. Well, we've created a platform that we designed strategic for small businesses. It's very user friendly, it's intuitive, it helps owners get out of their own way. It makes it real easy to just process the payroll. We do all their tax filings, we do all the quarterlies, their year ends. So you take care of that little tactical thing that keeps owners up at night. And then on top of that, from a service perspective, we have HR directors, safety, risk, loss control directors. I've got what we call a business partner who's a true kind of consultant. So that team wraps their arms around these small businesses and helps them stay out of mud of trying to grow and manage a small business through all those different, call them channels, for lack of a better term, right? Payroll, HR, risk, true consulting. And then, and this is where we are so different than these traditional PEOs, Devin, and I hope this makes sense to you. If you need workers' comp as part of what you're doing for a small business, we can look at that. And we use Chubb as our paper. But what we don't do is we don't co-employ like a traditional PEO does. It's hybrid, which means you don't lose care, custody, control of your employees if you come on board our workers' comp. Now, it's very competitive. We've got over 8,000 clients across the country on this. We've been around for over 70 years, publicly traded. So a lot of solid kind of, as an old boss of mine would call, bona fides of who we are. Does that make sense, Devin?
For sure.
So you need workers' comp? We can help you there and be very competitive. If you don't, let's use our payroll and our services to support you. Let's say you need benefits. One of the toughest things right now for small businesses is providing cost-effective benefits for their employees. To recruit and retain employees, it's not just about their salaries, right? It's about providing. And the market right now has just become almost priced out for these small companies. Again, call it 100 employees or less, very hard to get really good, very robust benefits. So we've built a program because of our buying power that provides a great health benefit, plus all the ancillaries if you need them. Dental, vision, chiropractic, short and long term, those types of things. So now we're able to come to our clients and come to the market and say, Devin, you've got a small business. You don't have the buying power that those large companies have that a lot of times you compete with. Let us help you with things that you do every day. You process payroll. Let us help you there and get that off your shoulders or support you there. You have HR issues, human capital stuff, right? Every day. Safety, risk, loss control, true business consulting. Where are you going as an organization? What's your 1, 3, 5-year goals? What are the challenges you face? What keeps you up at night? And then, Devin, from there, can we help you from any of those insurance aspects? Do you need workers' comp? Let's take a look and see if we can help there. If it's competitive for you. Do you need benefits? Let's look there. What if you need a 401k? We can take a look at that for you. What if you're growing and you need good employees? That right now seems to be one of the number one challenges with small businesses, getting and retaining, right? Well, we have a division that recruits. We don't staff. We're not a day labor type of a group, but we will recruit and sift through and vet candidates for our clients and give them the opportunity to not do the heavy lifting and let us do that for them. So in theory, we're partnering with the small business community to provide them with services only the big boys have access to. Does that make business sense, Devin?
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect. That's the overview I want to set because it's hard for people to understand. I mean, there's so much on the plate, right? And it truly is a buffet. You can grab the pieces you want. What I'd love to talk about is let's talk about decisions. So as a small business owner, if you're listening to this, you may, if you're just kind of ramping up, you're probably doing things one way. If you're established and you may be having different problems, hyper growth are going to create different scenarios. But in your decision making, right, if we look at payroll, HR, risk, and then kind of the insurance benefit products, there are a lot of ways that you can shop and make those decisions. So Dion, let's talk through that. What are some things that they might be doing now for payroll? Let's just stay in the payroll space, right? So they might be using Augusto or their bookkeeper or their CPA. So if that's where they are today, why might they consider outsourcing to a BBSI or outsourcing in general? Why might they consider making a move on the payroll side?
Good question, Devin. Good question. I would start my answer by asking you a question. What kind of support does a traditional payroll company, just a payroll company, provide that small business when it comes to laws, rules, regulations, compliance? What kind of support do they truly give them? What kind of customer support? What kind of accessibility do you see in industry today?
Love that. So let me jump in on that because I think that's a great way for a small business owner to wear the right hat and put the right lens on, right? Let's look at your current service provider, right? If you're using Augusto, if you're using QuickBooks, if your bookkeeper or CPA is processing your payroll for you, maybe you're doing it in-house and you're doing it yourself last minute, right? Because you forgot payrolls tomorrow. That is a good question. Like, what do all those things provide? Are they simply just taking data, hitting a button and generating checks, or are they doing more for you? And what does more look like? So I'll push it back to you, Dion. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're getting a ton of service other than it's getting processed, right? So give us some examples of how you've helped clients really save time and win in the payroll aspect and where BBSI can kind of leverage there, or just any sort of outsourced vendor could help a small business.
Makes sense. And yes, to continue kind of down that vein, most payroll companies seem to be just that, cutting checks. filing taxes, doing year end. But you and I both know that there is so much more to that. There is so much from a compliant perspective. There are so many issues because as a small business owner, Devin, you don't want to be a payroll expert. You don't want to be a tax expert. You don't want to be a compliance expert. You want to spend your time building that home if you're a builder, right? Well, cooking those cookies if you've opened up a cookie shop. So bringing along somebody who has expertise in that space, who can come alongside you, free up some of your time that you're spending in payroll, also give you a little bit of a peace of mind of knowing not only do I know it's done right, but if I have any questions, I can pick up the phone and call Devin, my payroll specialist at BBSI, and he knows me and he can answer my questions. In fact, if he doesn't, he'll find out the answers and get back to me because he's not a 1-800 call center. He's a dedicated payroll specialist for that client. And with that, what we're doing is we're saying, now we've lifted a little bit of a burden off your shoulders in that area. But I want to add something to that, if I may. Payroll and human resources go hand in hand because there are so many things that are happening within laws and rules, compliance that affect payroll. And they affect it by how do you hire? How do you fire? How do you manage? How do you discipline employees? And so if you don't have those two hands talking to each other, you can be running payroll properly and not realize, man, I just did something wrong on this employee side and it's about to hurt me. May, in fact, get me out of compliance on my payroll side of the equation. Make sense?
Yeah, I love that. And I love the goal of these conversations is to help small business owners understand there's options, right? And I think that often as a small business owner, I've been one, you just make decisions. It's easy. It's usually the path of least resistance, right? Like,
right.
Hey, this thing just popped up in my inbox. It sounds great. I'm going to go ahead and just do that. And then we get into complacency, right? Where we're just moving down the path that we chose because it was not a resistant path. But I think you bring up some really important pieces that I want a small business owner to consider, which is if payroll is just a check of the box currently, you're missing a lot of opportunity because overtime could be a problem, right? And overtime to HR is a great conversation. If you're just processing checks, but you're not paying attention to, hey, my whole team is overburdened and I'm paying extra because they're all working all these extra hours. Well, that's a good tee up to HR to say, hey, maybe we need to do some recruiting or change some shifts or expand hours, or maybe even it gets into a business conversation of, hey, where's our capacity? Do we need more space? Do we need more real estate, more people, more operations, better systems of product? Like all these things can trigger from one highlight on payroll. And I think that what you mentioned, and I think where small businesses need to pay attention is there are vendors and resources you can use that will raise that flag for you and say, hey, we noticed that your payroll doubled this week. Let's talk about that. Are you adding more vehicles? Are you paying them more overtime? Hey, have you synced up with your insurance agent on that? Hey, have you talked to your realtor about your future plans? Hey, have you talked to, and really kind of help be a little bit of the quarterback in those conversations. So just know that there's vendors there. You did mention one thing that I'll set up and I think we should talk about is when you're interviewing these vendors, and you're looking to outsource payroll or HR, and if you look at industry lingo, it could be ASO or PEO, different models like that. One thing I would tell you, and Dion, you can speak on it, is ask them where the team is. So ask them where your support system is. Are you just a number and you call 1-800 if you have a question? Or is there a dedicated team to you? Ask them that process. So Dion, talk to me about that. Talk to me about kind of how BBSI sets himself apart in that space.
I love that. Good point, Devin. So if you think about anything you do, a product is only as good as the way it was built and the way that it's serviced. So to your point, BBSI is structured to have local and regional teams that service those clients. And the reason I say it that way is you're not calling New York for a payroll expert when you are in San Diego. You're calling San Diego, right? my team is all here regional. And the reason for that is when you have an issue, you don't want to call the West Coast. In fact, I have a couple of clients right now that came to us because their payroll companies were on the West Coast and clients 3 hours ahead, Pacific time. So they couldn't get a customer service person until 10 a.m. Eastern time. Well, what's happening between 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock before you get somebody on the phone, if you will, right? And then the other part of that process is, well, my day's over at 5 o'clock Eastern, but they're 2 o'clock West Coast. So the service window is so tight, you feel like, what do I do now? Right? What do I do now? So BBSI is structured so that our teams are always regional and local. If you need somebody, you've got their cell phones. If you need somebody, you know their hours of operation because they're your hours of operation. Because when something happens and this is a small business owner, Devin, it doesn't always happen between 8 and 5. And so when something happens, you get a phone call from an employee early in the morning, you get a phone call late at night, something happens, you need to be able to have access to your people at all times. And especially, like you said, during those working hours, that's where we really strive to be far better than what's going on in the market. Our service is why people stay.
Love
Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, for sure. No, and I think, and again, as a buyer, it's important that you don't just see shiny numbers or shop best price. We all know that, yes, price is important and our cost is important, but at the end of the day, what you're buying has to service your business. And that's why I recommend every year you need to hold your vendors accountable. You need to meet with them and talk, right? Here's what I'm doing. Here's where I'm going. Here's what I'm looking at. Are you still relevant to where I am today and where I want to go? Or do I need to look at something? Do I need to change something? Maybe I bring a piece of the business in-house that makes sense, right? And you need to adjust the relationship. So I know you've worked with hundreds of businesses. You've been in the space. You've been in a couple of different markets. I'd love to hear some kind of journeys of growth, right? So talk to me about one or two stories where a business has grown and kind of highlight some of those ways that BBSI as a partner allowed them to grow more efficiently.
Good question. I've got two here in Tennessee that kind of come to mind. One of them is an organization that 10, 11 employees when they started, and they came on board with us because they were using a local payroll company that was just that, cut checks. Well, this is a multi-state company, and they didn't realize some of what was happening wasn't being done properly from tax perspectives, from filings and so on and so forth. They were just cutting checks. So when we brought them on board and we started doing what we do, we'll call it a deep dive, you call it a partnership development meeting. We wanted to learn about the organization and where their strengths were, where their shortcomings were, where their challenges were. And as that started to happen, we started to see some things that didn't make any sense. So going through the process, and this is what having a dedicated payroll person will do for you, a dedicated HR person, a dedicated risk manager, because they're all looking at not only their space, if you will, right, their lane of what they do, but as they start to hear these conversations, they go, well, wait a minute. You guys aren't doing that right in that state from a tax perspective. And this is how it's going to affect you from an HR perspective. So the short version of that client is we got them back on track the right way. We found out one of the states where they thought they had workers' comp, they didn't. We also found out they weren't covered properly. And through this evolution, they've grown. I think they're running 16, 17 employees now over the last 6, 7 months. They've come back to us and said, thank you for doing this. Thank you for this. We don't have health insurance for our employees because it's always been cost prohibitive. Can you take a look at that for us now? So we're trying to be that trusted advisor for this group to say, payroll, let's do that. Let's analyze that. Let's make sure it's good. Workers' comp, which they needed, let's cover that. Let's make sure it's done right. Let's make sure the codes are right, so on and so forth. but where else are you struggling that we may be able to now assist? And that's really the role of a true trusted advisory group, which is what our team is for my clients, is true trusted advisors that aren't just trying to tactically check the box and move on. But how do we engage with you, Devin? Where are the goals? That client, we know where they're trying to get to, and they're in about 7 states right now, and they want to continue to multiply. To have a group like my team that's around them, that they can ask questions of, when we get to that state, what are the things we need to be aware of? And I can promise you, payroll company wouldn't have a single clue about how to answer those questions. One other, just for what it's worth, brought on a client about 8 months ago. He had 4 employees. He had left the company that he was working for. And this happens all the time. You know this too, Devin, because he thought, I can do it better, I can do it cheaper, and I can do it for myself. And so he did. And he started with 3 guys that came with him. 8 months ago, 9 months ago, we brought him on with 4 guys. He's running 17 employees now, and the changes that have occurred are unbelievable. And we ask our owners this all the time. And thankfully, we were able to watch this process. Can you run your business at 3 times the size you are today the same way? If you've got 4 now, can you run this company with 12 employees the same? The answer is no. So our team was able to look forward with him and say, as you get to this size, here's some changes we need to make. As you get to this size, here's some things we need to start implementing. And again, he's now running, I think, 16, 17 employees because of the things my team's been doing with him. He's been able to sustain growth without the pain that comes of not knowing what's around the corner. And those are just kind of 2 examples of clients we're working with right now where we've done tactical elements. We've done payroll, and no disrespect. We've done payroll, and payroll's payroll. Payroll consulting is very different than payroll processing. And that's where we're at. We're doing workers' comp. Where we're really making an impact is being those true trusted advisors for these clients, so that as tactical things need to be done, and benefits is down the road for my other client that I just talked to you about, the 17 Life Group. But as things come down the road, they're looking towards us to say, how do we help? How do we help? And they're not out there on their own. And you know this as well as anybody, Devin, because you've run small businesses. A small business owner is so isolated. They don't know where to turn. They're just doing what they do. And a lot of times it's by the seat of their pants. We want to come in and be that solution and be those advocates. As things are changing, let us support you, not just insure you, not just cut your checks for you, but let us be that trusted advisory group for you, because you know statistics of small businesses starting up and how many of them make it past their 3rd year, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a little heartbreaking, the percentage of companies that don't make it past that year 3. And that seems to be the turning point. So we want to be there for those small businesses as they continue to grow, as they continue to have challenges, and say, how do we partner with you? I don't want to be a vendor. I want to be a partner. And that's what we're seeing. And that's why we're here in Tennessee, because we've been doing this for a long time across the country. And this market here is growing astronomically, as you know, Middle Tennessee. So we're here helping these small businesses here as they continue to grow. So I hope that answers your question.
That's great. Yeah, there's two paths I want to go down off of that. First, I want to talk about you don't know what you don't know. And I think that this is a huge reason to, one, bring experts on, right? Like if you're doing everything yourself, or your brother, sister, aunt, uncle, cousin, right? Mom, mother-in-law, someone, right, is managing the books, is running your payroll, and you're starting to grow, or you're moving into other states, counties, districts, you really need to seek advice, right? You need to seek advice from your CPA to understand tax consequences and financial planning. You probably need a financial planner to talk about what do we do with the money that's left over. You may need to renegotiate with your insurance agent on exposure. What happens if we go virtual versus physical office? Like there's so many complexities there. You have to have a team around you that allows you to just run the business, right? Do the part that you shouldn't be an expert in all these other things. So
Right.
one thing I want to highlight from your first story, right, is that multi-state exposure. Right? They started moving to other states. It made sense. Business opportunity was there. They jumped on it. They had employees willing. Remote work's easy. But now you get into the complexities of work comp, payroll taxes and withholdings in those states. Where do they live versus where do they work? What's the exposure? How do I offer benefits to them? Because each state may have different benefit clauses or ways to navigate it. And again, we may just be running payroll thinking, hey, we're good, we're withholding taxes and we're paying. But then what else have we exposed ourselves to that could then end up costing you a ton of money, right? In either legal repercussion or states coming after you for stuff. So I want to highlight that piece of your story. I think that if you are a multi-state employer, or if you're a small business that's looking to expand regional or national, you need a partner. You need someone on your team that you can talk to proactively and say, hey, we're looking at going from California and we want to save taxes. So we're going to move our headquarters to Nevada or Nashville or Florida or somewhere else, which a lot of people are moving. And hey, we're going to need to navigate moving some of our employees, and then navigate severance packages for some of our employees, and then navigate recruiting in a new market we don't have a brand in. You need a partner, right? So there's so much complexity there. So that's the first takeaway I really want to highlight. The second story I want to dive into. So you mentioned the 3X conversation. Now, one thing I appreciate about BBSI is the consultative nature in all positions, right? The payroll specialist doesn't just process payroll. HR director doesn't just make you compliant and write a handbook, which a lot of HR companies, that's where they start, right? Is we'll get you a handbook. The handbook's great. But what about your culture? What about your management flow and structure? What about communication? What about some lean things to help your organization run better? Risk, same thing. I wrote workers' comp. Okay, great. But what happens when I have a claim, need to navigate a claim? What am I doing proactively with PPE and all these things to keep us safe? So let's give business owners some tools. So 3X is one of them, right? The idea there is how far out can you see before it's foggy, you don't understand, and what's going to break. What are some other tools that we could walk a small business through right now that they could actually test on their own business?
Good question. So a number of things. I always like to start foundationally, and we do a lot of questions around where are you going, Devin? Where's your next 1, 3, and 5 year goals, right? Where are you going? And the reason we do that is, as I said earlier, payroll and HR overlap. They touch each other, right? Safety, risk, loss control, and HR also overlap. Payroll and safety overlap. Somebody gets injured, right? What are we doing with them? Are you doing lost time? Are you going to do return to work programs? How does that work? Consulting continues to support these small businesses on where do you see yourself going in the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months? And as an organization, how do we support you? Because, and to get to your question, if you have, for example, your work comp over here on the left, you've got a payroll company over there on the right, you don't really have anybody that you lean into from HR, from a, again, employee perspective, what they call human capital, you don't have anybody that helps you from a safe, risky loss control perspective. None of those things are touching each other, but they're all extremely important to your organization. When you meld all those in under one organization, and to answer your question, what I would ask that business owner is, are those things all supporting each other? Or are you just cutting checks and assuming everything's okay? Are you hiring and firing and managing and assuming everything's okay for the organization? Are you good enough, or are you lucky that you haven't had any injuries, or you've got to deal with workers' comp, or you've got to deal with modified duty because somebody got hurt? Do you not have health benefits? And your guys are looking at other organizations going, hey, you know what? I can go get a job over there with my competitor and he'll offer me benefits that you can't. So what I would say to a small business owner is, what did you start business to accomplish? And if you're a home builder, that's what you wanted to do. Then why do you want to spend time in any of these other spaces? when you can instead partner with organizations that do tactical and strategic in partnership with you? Because your work comp carrier does workers' comp, great, but are they strategic in how they're watching over your loss controls and what's happening from a risk mitigation and being out on job sites for you, what have payroll companies cutting checks, but are they talking to you, to your point of Devin earlier, about what they're seeing with growth or some of the changes that are going to be happening down the road from a legal perspective that you need to be aware of as we go into 2023? Do you have a group that is surrounding you so you can be the best home builder you can possibly be while not being a expert in running the business and ensuring the business in providing benefits for the business? Can you be the best at what you wanted to be and bring people around you to support you in those areas that you really don't need to spend a lot of time becoming an expert in? Does that make sense to a small business owner?
No, it's great. I think that it highlights, again, that idea that if you have all these vendors, are they talking, right? And it doesn't work, right? Like, it doesn't work if everything's siloed. I do a ton in the sales and marketing space, and it's the same thing. Everyone likes to treat sales and marketing as separate. However, the marketing has to transition to the sales team at some point, right, and then it has to continue to support the sales team during the close because they're going to be doing research and validating the company. And so those two have to, so I think that that's a great thing to do. Is two takeaways for a business owner. Step one, have you really thought past today? Have you put yourself in an environment where you're looking ahead, right? Have you sat down and said, hey, you know what, where am I going for 2023, 2024, 2025? Where am I going? Like, I started this business and right now I'm just feel like I'm on the hamster wheel, right? I'm just surviving today.
Correct.
Well, that's great, but where are we actually going? Because if we don't know where we're going, we may make a decision today that solves what feels like today's problem, but it doesn't solve tomorrow's problem, right? Maybe we hire an employee to buy back time, but we hired the wrong employee because we didn't look at our growth model and understand what management skill sets we're going to need in the future. Whereas if you had slowed down, done some planning, got out of your office, right? Talk to a partner that can guide you through the right questions to make you think different and go, hey, you know what, instead of that hire that's $20 an hour, let's hire at 30 so that they can become a manager and buy me back exponentially more time in the next year. So you have to do that, get out of your way. And then the second thing you mentioned, right, is make sure they talk. So make your plan. And then I want you to, I already said this a couple of times, every year audit everything you spend money on. So I want you to go down your expense list. I want you to look at every single thing that comes out, from your credit card processing to the marketing company, the website hosting, the insurance agent, your financial advisor, your CPA, your accountant. And I want you to think about, hey, what did I actually pay that vendor this year? What am I projected to pay them next year? And what did they do for me? What did they do for me? Did they just provide the thing? Did the bookkeeper just show up, process receipts, and tell me the books are balanced? Or did we actually have real conversations about, hey, you know what, you're behind, or your cash flow is an issue, or why are you not collecting up front? Why are you net 90? Why don't we go to front loaded pay? All these things are strategic, right? So ask your vendors, right, and hold them accountable and make sure that they're providing more than they should, and especially that strategic part. So love those takeaways, Dion. So let's talk sales. I always like to tuck in a couple of sales questions. You know, you've done sales in Southern California, doing sales in a new market. How do you sell? If someone's in sales and biz dev and they're trying to go out there and build a book, what's your recommendation? What are a couple tips to a salesperson that could help them win?
I would say number one is get to really understand the market. We talk about relevance, right, Devin? I could have the greatest product in the world, but if it sits on the shelf because it's not relevant in my market, then it's not doing anybody any good. And so we're always curious as to what is needed in the market. I'll give you a great example. BBSI has been around for 70 years. You know how long we have offered health benefits as part of our package to our clients? Never, until January of 2023. And you know why? Because we finally said enough of our clients have asked enough times about this type of product that we need to make sure we can provide that for them. They have asked, why will you not do this? Why are you not providing health insurance? Because it was a relevant piece of their operational world that we didn't provide. And they said, why not? So now we do. And so from a sales perspective, always be curious of what is important and what's relevant in your market. And then make sure that what you're providing is a solution to those problems. And so here in Middle Tennessee, it is very small business based. And those small businesses are struggling in a couple different areas, health benefits being one of them. Finding good employees and retaining those employees is another. Yes, payroll processing. We're learning that there are a lot of larger payroll processing companies. They're not local. They're not service-based. They don't have good customer service. And so small businesses is just taking what's off the shelf and using it the way that it's built. We're coming in and saying, what if we could provide you with a better mousetrap, with better support, that does more things that you need, and we can be engaged and relevant with where you are today and where you're trying to go. And so don't sell tactical commodities, because if you buy a commodity, you'll probably lose to somebody who's got a cheaper commodity, right? You come for a buck, you'll leave for a buck. From a sales perspective, be relevant, be curious. How do you use support and serve your customers, not just sell them a commoditized product? Because these business owners are so busy. There's one right now that we're talking to that doesn't even understand what they purchased from a health perspective. They just know it was the cheapest product. And we're consulting with them on the whys and the why nots of providing something a little bit different to their clients, to their employees, that ultimately is a better buy. And it's not just a bottom line cost. And that's a true trusted advisor versus a salesperson.
I love
right?
it. Well, and I love, I think again, there's two really good nuggets in there for sales professionals or small business owners. First is relevancy, right? I
Right.
think so often people won't adjust, right? They won't change, they won't pivot, and they go to market with a product. And we're seeing this with generational businesses, right? Generational business is transitioning to generation 2 or 3 in that family structure. And as they transition, the relevancy of the product probably changes. And the new generation has different perspective on what makes sense. And it's important to remain relevant. Right? So listen to your customers, right? Listen to the market. You may think, or it has been, that this one thing is super relevant for a period of time, but if it's changing, you have to adapt. You can't just stay stagnant. So relevancy is great. Second thing, you didn't say the word, but you explained it in your process, is curiosity. I think in sales, right, I love to say the saying that everybody wants to buy, nobody wants to be sold, right? We live in an economy that teaches us to purchase, right? We are great consumers. So why, as salespeople, do we try to force the issue? They're already trained. If we are curious, we get to understand our client, our consumer. We match their needs with a solution because we took the time to get to them, understand where they live, where they're going, what's wrong, what they need, what their current providers are or aren't doing. And then we provide a solution that aligns. Your close rate's going to go up exponentially. Now, your sales process might be longer, but your close rate's going to go up and your retention rate's going to go through the roof, because no one else can come in the door and shove something down the client's throat hoping it's going to close. They have to go through the same process you went through to buy that client's respect. And so two things Dion said that are phenomenal advice for you guys: relevancy, make sure you're relevant, make sure you're staying relevant to the market, to your product, to your sector. And two, be curious. Be curious as you're out there selling, building relationships, and actually take time to understand your market. I know, Dion, one example you gave me before we hit record was work comp, right? In the California market, work comp is almost the main talking point all the time because it's expensive, it's a pain in the ass, and employees in that market have a different mentality. But when you go to Tennessee or Nevada or other markets, it may not be as relevant. It might just be a piece of the puzzle, not the puzzle. So Great feedback. Hey, let's jump into the last two questions. So the first question I love to ask before we wrap up is, on your own journey, what's something you wish you could tell your younger self about your own journey? A lesson that you've learned along the way that you wish your younger self had heard?
Good question, my friend. I would say I wish I was more curious and less answer guy when I was younger. And what I mean by that is, and yes, I am a little bit older and gray shows that. When you're in sales in early days, it's transactional. I got the next close. How do I save you a couple bucks? You can sign on the dotted line. And you miss the opportunity to be curious, to ask good, relevant, open-ended questions, to become that consultant that you should be, as opposed to that salesman that you really don't want to be. So in my latter years, I have slowed down the process of trying to get to a transaction by instead trying to get to more questions. Because when you do that, you become that trusted advisor, that consultative perspective, as opposed to a salesperson.
That's amazing advice. And it's so relevant, right? There's a great book out there if you guys, if you want to check a book out, it's called Slow Down, Sell Faster. And it aligns with what Dion just said, right? I think as sales professionals, we attach emotion to the sales process a lot, right? We get high, there's lows, highs, lows. I recommend you eliminate emotion by having systems and processes that build your pipeline and hold you accountable, because then it allows you to do what Dion said, right? It allows you to just follow the process at the client's pace and allow them to purchase. And you just be curious, supportive, and educational along the way, right? Now, as a young sales guy, it's hard, man. You want to go get deals, and again, you want to hunt and kill, but there's an art to that. And I love that advice, man. And that was worded so well, and it's so relatable. So last question I like to ask is book recommendation or podcast recommendation. What's something everyone should read or check out?
Wow. I will tell you one book that has been circled, highlighted, underlined, probably 20 years. And it is the How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that's an oldie but goodie. But any of us that have ever been in sports can go back to fundamentals never get old. So if you're in basketball, fundamentals of footwork and shot. If you're in baseball, fundamentals of a good swing. If you're whatever your sport, it's always about pure fundamentals. And the better you are correlates to the better your foundations are. And How to Win Friends and Influence People is a foundational understanding humanities. At the end of the day, you want to work with and purchase from people that you want to work with and purchase. And I tell you, that book has taught me so much about people that I gave it to my kids. I've given it to many other people that are in different sales industries and just said, this has nothing to do with sales. It has everything to do with understanding people. Because at the core of who we are is wanting to understand others. And if you're good at that, you can be good at anything that you put your hands to. And that would be the book I would say, don't read it, use it. Let it go back to it.
Well, right? I love that. And I love that you brought up, like you said, an oldie but goodie, but it is one book that's on my annual list, right? So it's on the annual read list. It's not scheduled into a certain month, but every time during the year, I try to pay attention to, am I getting distracted by noise? Am I getting hyped up on the process? And am I missing out on the people part? And if so, I jump back into that book and dig into reminders of, again, those fundamentals that have never changed, right? And we didn't talk about it in business today, guys, but 80% of business is identical. 10% might be relative to your industry, and 10% you made up, right? 10% is in your head, you think you're unique. At the end of the day, business is business, whether you're a nonprofit, a small business, a large business, an international business, the fundamentals of business are identical. And so if you catch yourself saying you don't understand, or yeah, but I'm unique, you need to check that saying, because it's an excuse and it's covering something up. It's covering up something, an insecurity, a weakness in your business. And instead of making the excuse, I challenge you to dig into that and figure out, well, what's actually broken? What's actually wrong? So love the fundamentals. Love everything you've said, man. Hey, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you educating us on why outsource to vendors, what a PEO is, and what the outsource industry looks like, history and information about BBSI, being vulnerable and telling us some of your story and what you're doing for people, man. I appreciate you. And again, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, my friend. Good doing it. I'll see you soon.